let's get into this deep dive. The stuff you sent over about China,
Yeah.
wow, there's a lot here. We're talking economic reports, we got cultural analyses, even some personal stories in the mix. It paints a picture.
Oh, for sure.
Way more complicated than, just East versus West.
Right, definitely. It's not so simple. We're really going beyond the headlines here.
Right.
Trying to uncover what's shaping Chinese society, the
Yeah.
pressures people are dealing with, and how they're reacting.
Yeah.
And you've given us some really interesting material to work with.
One thing that really jumped out at me was this tension between China's, like a booming economic success.
Right.
But then the reality of everyday life for a lot of people there,
Yeah.
you see this incredible drive, this ambition, but at the same time,
Oh, yeah.
almost like this sense of exhaustion or being trapped
Yeah. Feelings.
in a system that's not really working for them.
Yeah. That tension is really important to understanding what's going on in China today. It goes beyond economic inequality. I think it's about the psychology.
Yeah.
The psychological toll of competing
Right.
and how traditional values are kind of eroding
Fading away.
with this really fast modernization.
Speaking of competition, there's this term involution that kept popping up. I got to be honest.
Yeah.
I've even heard of this before.
It's a new one for a lot of people, yeah.
What is it? Like everyone's running faster and faster, but getting nowhere.
It's a great way to put it. Imagine everyone fighting for the same limited resources, the top universities, the good jobs.
Right. Even just an apartment.
Exactly. Even just finding a decent place to live.
Wow.
The pressure is enormous. That's where you get things like that.
Like what?
A 6 work culture, working 12 hours a day, 6 days a week.
Oh, wow.
It's just asking for burnout.
I can see that. So is that where this lying flat movement comes in? People just saying, I'm done. I'm not going to burn myself out for this.
Exactly. Lying flat is like this passive resistance.
Okay.
It's pushing back against all that pressure to achieve,
Interesting.
to buy more things. It's fascinating. I think it shows a real disillusionment
Yeah.
with what modern Chinese society is promising them.
And that disillusionment seems to go even deeper. Like with the education system, right? The sources you sent.
Yeah.
It's kind of bleak, right? It's all rote learning, endless tests.
Right.
Just memorizing, not really thinking critically.
It's like it's designed to create obedient workers, not independent thinkers. There's this quote from a teacher in one of the articles that
Right.
really stuck with me. He said, "We're teaching them how to pass tests,
Right.
not how to think for themselves."
It's a little scary.
It is, yeah.
If people can't think for themselves,
Yeah.
how can a society innovate? How can it progress?
It's a huge question, and it really ties into this larger theme of control that runs through all these sources. The education system, the media,
Right.
even that social credit system.
Yeah.
There's this constant effort to manage the story, to control what people say,
Yeah.
and ultimately squash dissent.
Let's talk more about that social credit system. It sounds like something out of a dystopian novel. Like it can't actually be happening.
Right, but it is.
I thought
It's
it was
essentially,
dork.
it's designed to reward good behavior and punish bad behavior.
Okay.
But the state decides what's good or bad. So criticizing the government online,
Yeah.
you could lose points. Then you might have trouble traveling
Oh, wow.
or getting a loan, maybe even getting your kid into a good school.
Wow, that is chilling. It's like gamifying obedience,
Yeah.
where people are always censoring themselves because they're afraid of being punished.
It makes you wonder what that does to freedom
Mm-hmm.
and creativity in the long run.
And this is where that whole social Darwinism thing comes in, right? The survival of the fittest idea.
Absolutely. It's really ingrained in Chinese culture, and the country's rapid economic growth has just made it stronger.
So it's more than keeping up with the Joneses. It's like you gotta survive
Yeah.
in this hyper-competitive environment.
Exactly. And that mentality can be brutal.
Yeah, I read about that factory worker who took his own life because of the pressure.
Right.
It's heartbreaking.
It is.
It really makes you think about the human cost of all this economic progress.
It's a good point. And this connects to another issue. The decline of traditional family values.
Okay.
The one-child policy, the pressure to succeed.
Yeah.
People moving from rural areas to the cities for work. It's all weakened family ties.
Create a lot of isolation, right?
Exactly.
You've got empty nests, parents left behind, young people putting off marriage and kids because they're so focused on their career.
It all adds up to a fragmented society.
And this idea of materialism makes things worse, doesn't it?
Yeah.
China went from valuing harmony and responsibility to individual ambition and getting rich.
It seems like they traded one set of problems for another.
Yeah.
Even with all this pressure and control and disillusionment, there are signs of pushback.
Like people are fighting back,
Yeah, in different ways.
lying flat.
Yeah,
Right. Yeah.
that's one example. But you also see it in the underground art scene.
Interesting.
Online communities where people are figuring out how to get around censorship.
To speak their mind.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And even things like Buddhism and Taoism are becoming more popular.
Right.
They offer something different from all that empty materialism.
So there's hope. People are looking for a better way.
That's what makes it so interesting.
Yeah.
We're not just seeing an authoritarian state,
Yeah.
It's more complex than that.
Right.
We're seeing those human stories that are shaping China's future.
And that's a good place to stop for now.
So we were talking about these pressures inside China.
Right. And how that all ties into their
Yeah.
global ambition.
Exactly. It's all connected. Like, take their education system.
Okay.
It's not just about producing those obedient workers,
Yeah.
It's also about creating this strong sense of nationalism.
Right.
This
So,
loyalty to the party.
yeah, like they're raising a generation
Yeah.
ready to take China's vision to the world.
Exactly.
But without the ability to really question it. They don't have the critical thinking skills.
Right.
And this control over information, it's everywhere.
Yeah.
It goes way beyond the classroom, the Great Firewall, all that censorship, the surveillance.
It's about managing the narrative, how people see the world.
And ultimately, keeping the party in control.
That's the goal.
We talked about that social credit system.
Yeah.
That's a perfect example of how this control plays out.
Oh, absolutely. It's not just about punishing dissent.
Right.
It's about creating a society where people police themselves
Out of fear.
because they're afraid of the consequences.
Makes you wonder, can a society that values obedience so much really compete in a globalized world?
It's a big question. You need innovation. You need people to think for themselves.
Exactly.
And speaking of competition, we can't ignore the economic side of China's ambition.
Right. The Belt and Road Initiative, all those massive infrastructure projects.
Exactly.
It's a clear sign they want to change the global economic order.
It's not just about economic dominance either.
It's about influence, right?
Strategic influence. They build these ports, these railways, pipelines all over the world. They're getting access to resources, creating markets for their goods.
Projecting their power.
Exactly.
And a lot of countries seem happy to accept China's investment. But there are concerns, right?
Oh, absolutely. Debt traps, political pressure.
Right.
It's a fine line between a good partnership
Right.
and taking advantage of someone. And the more powerful China gets, the more people are going to be watching what they do inside and outside China.
The delicate balancing act.
For sure.
And speaking of balancing acts, let's go back to those family values we were talking about. It's almost a paradox. China's projecting this image of strength and unity to the world.
Right.
But at home, things are falling apart.
It really goes to the heart of what China's going through with modernization, I think.
Right.
The one-child policy, this insane economic growth, people moving from the countryside to the city.
Yeah.
It's all had a huge impact on families and traditions.
You see it in rising divorce rates, people putting off marriage,
Right.
more elderly people living alone,
The support systems are breaking down.
governments trying to fill the void,
Yeah, in a way.
patriotism.
You see it in that China Dream rhetoric. All this talk about national rejuvenation.
Yeah.
It's like they're trying to build a new national identity.
Based on economic success and global power.
Exactly.
But can you really replace those deeper social bonds?
That's the question. Can you force social cohesion? Can you manufacture a sense of belonging
Or does it have to come from something deeper?
from shared values, traditions, community?
It's a tough problem for China. On the one hand, they need to keep things under control to make sure nothing threatens the party.
Right.
But on the other hand, they need innovation.
Yeah.
They need creativity, critical thinking.
To really compete globally.
It's a tension you see everywhere in China.
Absolutely.
And it's probably going to get worse.
I think so too.
We haven't even touched on their military ambitions.
Right.
The growing military budget, what they're doing in the South China Sea, building advanced weapons.
It's making a lot of their neighbors nervous.
Yeah. People are worried about the balance of power shifting.
And you can't blame them. China sees itself as a rising power.
Rightfully so, maybe.
And as their economy and technology grow,
Mm-hmm.
so will their military,
And they'll be more willing to use it.
most likely.
And then there's cyberspace.
Oh, yeah,
The sources you sent, it's pretty scary what they're capable of.
it is.
Espionage, hacking, cyber weapons.
Cyberspace is a new battleground.
And China wants to dominate it.
Control information, shape the narrative,
Disrupt things.
and use those cyber attacks as a weapon.
It's a scary thought. What if they could shut down our power grid?
Yeah.
Or mess with our financial market?
Interfere with elections.
But not just a hypothetical either.
No, it's already
They've
happened.
been caught hacking governments and businesses.
Around the world.
It's a real threat.
Yeah.
And it shows how connected we all are.
Absolutely.
What happens in China affects all of us.
And as China gets stronger,
Yeah.
those effects will only get bigger.
So let's step back for a second.
Okay.
We've got this country dealing with all these internal pressures, social problems, economic inequality, people wanting more freedom.
And at the same time,
They're projecting this image of power to the world.
they're going after these big economic and geopolitical goals.
It's complicated.
It is full of contradiction, and nobody knows what's going to happen next. But one thing is for sure.
What's that?
China's a major force in the world, and their choices matter.
They matter to all of us. Okay, so we've seen all this stuff,
Yeah.
internal pressures, global ambition, but where does it go from here? What's the takeaway for our listener? Trying to make sense of China's role.
Well, I think the big takeaway is awareness.
Okay.
You can't just ignore what China's doing, their intentions, what they're capable of.
Yeah, you got to pay attention.
It all has consequences, not just for people in China.
Right, it affects all of us.
Exactly.
So knowledge is power, right? The more we know about what's happening in China, the better prepared we are.
Exactly.
Deal with whatever comes next.
For sure. But awareness isn't enough.
Right, what can we actually do?
That's the tough part. There's no easy answer. But I think it starts with engagement.
Engaging with them,
Yeah, but it has to be informed engagement. Right. We need to talk about China, be honest about where we can cooperate.
but also where there might be problems.
Exactly. You got to find that balance.
In engagement and staying cautious.
Exactly.
Making sure we're protecting our own interests and values.
It's not easy. And it's important to remember that China isn't one big thing, you know?
Right, there are a lot of different voices there.
There are. We should be listening to those voices,
Yeah.
to the people in China, the
Yeah.
scholars, the activists.
The people who want more transparency.
Right. More accountability, more respect for human rights.
So it's about going beyond the stereotypes.
Exactly.
Understanding the nuances of Chinese
It
society.
is. And it's about understanding that China's future isn't set in stone. The choices they make are going to shape the whole 21st century.
And we all have a role to play in that, right?
We do.
It's daunting, for sure.
Yeah.
But maybe there's an opportunity here, too.
I think so.
If we approach China realistically, but also optimistically, maybe we can work together on those big challenges.
Climate change, global health.
Right. Create a better future for everyone.
That's the hope. But it's going to take work. We got to understand each other.
Be willing to have those tough conversations.
Exactly.
And for those of you listening, if you want to learn more, there are tons of great books out there.
Oh, yeah.
On Amazon Kindle, Google Play Books.
There's so much information out there.
Keep learning. Keep asking questions.
Keep engaged.
That's how we navigate this crazy world.
I agree.
And that's a wrap for our deep dive into China.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining us. Stay curious, stay informed. We'll see you next time.